Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing and most respected fields today, and earning your CISSP certification can open the door to some of the highest paying and most trusted roles in the industry. But passing the CISSP isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about understanding how to think like a security leader. That's exactly what this course is designed to do. I will walk you through every domain, simplify complex topics, and share real world examples that will help you not only pass the exam but truly master cybersecurity. So, before we begin, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell. This is the Domain 1 Security and Risk Management, and your CISSP journey starts right now. So hi everyone and welcome to the CISSP course. So before we dive in, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm a cybersecurity professional having over 16 years of IT industry experience. I have worked across various domains, mainly computer networks and information security. I hold multiple certifications, mainly the CISSP, CISA, CCSP, and the network certifications from Juniper, Huawei, and many others. So the CISP exam is basically based on 8 domains, and we can see the first domain, security and risk management, is the heaviest, and it carries overall weightage of 16%. So this domain also sets the tone for the rest of the domain because we will discuss the foundational concepts such as the CIA triad, the risk analysis, governance, different frameworks, and then these concepts will basically be used in all of the rest of the domains. And after the domain number 1, we will study the rest of the domains one by one. I will try to explain the concepts in a simple language and as practical as possible. So English is not my first language or mother language, so there may be some issues with my language, with my terminologies, or with my flow of communication. So you people need to excuse me for that. But I will I will try to be as clear as possible, and will try my best to explain the concept regardless of my communication skill in a best way possible. So the CISP exam is basically based on the CAT exam format, which is computerized adaptive testing. What does this mean? This means that you get a question, and if you get it correct, you get the question right, the next one may be difficult, and if you get it right too, the difficulty may increase. And if you miss a question or you get it wrong, the next one may be right. So it is called adaptive because the difficulty and the difficulty level is adjusted by the computer as per your performance. So the length of the exam is 3 hours, and you may encounter anywhere between 100 to 150 questions. The questions are mostly MCQs, multiple choice questions, but there may be some drag and drop questions, but mainly they are MCQs. So why we don't have a specific number, and the number varies between 100 and 150. So this is because if you are doing very well, let's suppose if you are answering most of the question, let's suppose 90% you are answering the question correctly, you may be stopped at 100, question number 100, your exam will stop automatically. And when you go to the checkout counter, you receive your result, you will be greeted with a very welcoming print note of congratulations that you have passed by attempting the 100 questions only. Similarly, some may go up to 125 questions. So when I was I attempted 1 to 5 questions, and then the exam stopped, and when I went to the counter, I passed. Some go all the way up to 150 questions, so it depends upon your performance. Similarly, on the flip side, if someone is performing maybe very poorly, he or she is answering the question incorrectly, and let's suppose 90% of the question he or she answered are incorrect. So again, he or she may be stopped at question number 100, and the exam may end automatically, and the result will be as expected. So that is the passing score, that out of 100, out of 1000, you need to get 700 points. So the exam is available in multiple languages, and it is need to be given at the ISC2 authorized Pearson BUE testing centers. So now let's get started with the actual content of this course, and our first topic is the CIA triad, and CIA is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and these are the main goals or the basic goals of information security. So confidentiality ensures information is accessible only to authorized individuals, and confidentiality of information can be ensured through multiple means, for example, through encryption. For example, an encryption algorithm AES, that is Advanced Encryption Standard, can be used to encrypt information so that it is accessible only to authorized user, and even if unauthorized gains access to this encrypted information, they won't be able to make sense of information because they won't have the decryption key. Next important pillar of the CIA triad is the integrity, which ensures data is accurate and unaltered. And integrity of information is mainly ensured through hashing. For example, a popular hashing algorithm is 256. So we will study the encryption, different types of encryption, similar hashing algorithm in details in the upcoming domains. But for now, these are just for starter, for the basics of information security, to rehash and refresh your knowledge about the basic concepts. And the last pillar of the CIA triad is availability, which ensures information and systems are accessible when needed. So this is important, this when, because the information should be accessible but also timely accessible. So if there is a lot of delay, or if the information is accessible not when needed but after a certain time, it means availability is compromised. So availability can be ensured through multiple means. For example, redundancy. Redundancy means that, let's suppose you have a server where users are getting, let's suppose we have a client getting services from this server, and we have a redundant server. So let's suppose if this server fails due to any reason, the user can be redirected to this server seamlessly without the compromise of the availability of information. So on the flip side of the CIA triad, we have DAD, which is disclosure, alteration, and destruction. So if confidentiality is not ensured, we have the disclosure of the information. And if integrity is not ensured, we have alteration in information. And if availability is not ensured, we have the destruction of information. If information is destroyed, or the information infrastructure is destroyed. For example, if the data center is destroyed due to a natural disaster, you won't have the availability of the services of information. So that, you can say, disclosure alteration is the flip side of the CIA triad. So these are some of the threats to the CIA, to confidentiality. The threats are social engineering, eavesdropping, and media reuse. So through these threats, the confidentiality of information can be compromised. So social engineering, for example, a hacker calls a company and pretends to be from the IT department and asks the employee to give them the username and password to fix an issue. So if the employee is strict into giving his or her username and password, it means the information, the confidentiality of information of this company is compromised. And this compromise was done through social engineering when hacker tricked the employee by giving the hacker the username and the password. Similarly, eavesdropping is sniffing on the sensitive information. An example can be given. Let's suppose if an employee of a company is sitting in a cafe and using the free cafe Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi traffic is unencrypted, and let's suppose there is another hacker sitting over here that is sniffing this information. So if this employee sends a sensitive email to another employee of the company and this hacker sniffs on that information or eavesdrops on that information, the confidentiality of the information of that company is again compromised. Media reuse, let's suppose a company has old PCs and wants to dispose of these PCs, and these PCs are sold to a third party or to another company. So if the third party retrieves the HDDs or hard drives from this PC, and if the the actual owner of the company has not made sure that the information of these HDD are actually wiped out, they simply formatted these hard drive. The sensitive information from these hard disk drives can be retrieved by the company, and thus the confidentiality of information will be compromised. Integrity, threats to integrity or corruption of the information, and malicious modification of information. So corruption of the information may be through, let's suppose, a power outage. Let's suppose a database server suddenly shut down due to power outage, and there was a corruption of file in the database and some information was destroyed or was corrupted, and so the information, the integrity of this database or information is uh, compromised and corrupted. Malicious modification means that, let's suppose there is an internal employee, let's suppose the DBA himself. So if the DBA is modifies the payroll and increase his salary in the payroll without approval, it means he has done malicious modification to the information. So that is, this type of threat is now also known as insider threat, because the employer is insider. He has the access to the information but has done modification maliciously. Similarly, availability, threats to availability are denial of service attacks such as DOS and DDoS. So these are the attacks where hackers flood the company applications or server with malicious requests, and the servers or the application are exhausted and not available to legitimate users. Similarly, natural disaster are also threat to the availability of information. So for example, earthquake can knock down a data center, and if there is not a redundant data center, the information to all the users that were served from this data center will not be available. So another important triad besides CIA is the AAA triad, and the AAA stands for authentication, authorization, and accounting, also known as non-repudiation. So authentication is verifying the user or system identity before granting access. And this can be done through, for example, MFA or multi-factor authentication. If we talk about single factor authentication, username and password. This is also username and password. This is also used to authenticate a user. So authentication is very important before granting access to any user and a system. The next step when the user is authenticated and logs into a system or application is authorization. Authorization means ensuring user only access what they are permitted to. So It is not the case that when he or she logs in, he has access to all the information available over there. There must be something that is out of the role or out of the reach of that specific user. And this is mainly done through role based access control. For example, the HR department may have specific functions which they can perform through HR user. So this is an HR user which have access to specific, such as we talked about, payroll application, but not to other sensitive information. Similarly, if we talk about another department, finance, so the finance department may have access to other information, and that authorization and access can be ensured through role-based access. So finance user will be given the finance user role, and the HR user will be given the HR user role. So the next important factor in the AAA triad is the accounting. So accounting is keeping track of user actions through logging and auditing. So what is logging and auditing? An example of logging and auditing is, for example, when a user logs in to a server, the server log shows the username, the user through which the user logged in, the timestamp at which the user logged in, and the action that were performed by the user. So the user at the later stage cannot deny that he or she performed those actions because we have a clear evidence of all the actions that the user performed and at specific time frame. So this is also known as non-repudiation. It means the user cannot deny having performed certain actions due to the process of accountability and auditing. So another important concept is the balance security. What does mean? What does we mean? What do we mean by the balance security? Balance security means that it should not be the case that you should throw every piece of security and information at your assets. The information security should be balanced. So same rules do not apply to all type of business. It means that information security should be tailored. Security needs to be tailored because, let's suppose, a hospital protects patient data, so it may have certain security requirements, while a retailer secures payments. So their requirement of information security may be different, and the information security system must be tailored according to each organization and requirements. So keep it to the organization type as we studied. Let's suppose if there is a small startup, they may need simple and less control as compared to a larger banks where we may need multiple control and more complex controls. Another important aspect is that the information security must align to the business goals. So this is very important one. You may expect multiple questions uh, regarding this concept, that the information security should here the business goal. It should not obstruct the business goal. It must align to the business goal. So security should enable, not block the productivity. So this is important, and you must keep in mind this concept. You may encounter some question in your exam relating to this concept. So now coming over to some important security definitions. So these will be used in the upcoming slides, these concepts. So it is important that we go through these one by one. So the first one is the asset. So asset is something valuable to the organization that needs protection. For example, the company's customer database containing names, emails, and credit card details is an asset to the organization, and its confidentiality, integrity, and availability must be protected. Another concept is the vulnerability, which is a weakness that could be exploited. Remember and focus on the term weakness. So, for example, we may have a software flaw or unpaged security hole in this customer database. So, we have an asset, and if this asset, that is the database, have some unpatched security hole, it means we have a weakness or we have a vulnerability in that customer database. Next concept is the threat, which is a potential event that can cause harm. For example, data theft or unauthorized to the customer record. So if unauthorized access to this customer database takes place, we may say that we have a threat of unauthorized access to this database. So this is a threat. Next is the threat agent, which is the person or entity that causes the threat. It is the agent or the person that carries the threat. So, for example, a cyber criminal trying to steal customer data. Another concept is exploit, which is the method or tool used to take advantage of a vulnerability in the system. So, for example, a SQL injection attack used to break into the database. And last one is the risk, which is the potential impact or loss if a threat succeeds in exploiting the vulnerability. So, an example of risk is financial loss or reputational damage due to the lead customer data, and this financial loss and reputational damage is to the organization. Our next topic is security control types. Security control can be divided into three categories, that is physical, technical, and administrative. We will study each of these and their example in a while. And they can also be divided functionality wise, and by functionality we can divide them into preventive, detective, corrective, recovery, and deterrent. So we will see what these are as well as their examples. First of all, the categories. So first one is the technical. Technical control are basically hardware or software mechanism used to manage access to resources and systems and provide protection for those resources and systems. You can also say, as the name indicates, these are the controls that are implemented uses technology, and technology in the form of either hardware or software. Next category is the managerial or administrative. So these are the policies and procedures, administrative controls defined by an organization's security policies. So they basically constitute the written policies and procedures. You can say they are not hardcore technical or physical control. They are just instructions in the form of policies as well as procedure. And the last category is the physical, which is security mechanism focused on providing protection to the facility and real world objects. So by facility, we mean the physical building or infrastructure. For example, you can say the data center. Now coming over to few examples of these categories. So the technical category examples include encryption, smart card, password, biometric, access control list, that is ACL, firewalls, routers, and IDS, IPS, intrusion detection and prevention system. The managerial control category example include policies, procedures, vendor management, hiring practices, background checks, data classification, security training, risk assessment, and vulnerability assessment. While the physical category example include guards, man traps, fences, lights, motion detectors, guard dogs, video cameras, alarms, and laptop locks. So these are physical. So as you can see, when we go to the security control distribution by functionality wise, we will see that these examples fit into different type of functional control. For example, the motion detector may be deterrent as well as detective security control. So let's now go to the, before we go to the security control types by functionality, we can see that these control basically works in layer. So this type of model is also known as defense in depth. So whenever we secure our assets, we apply these security controls in different layers. This is also known as, another name for this is layered defense. So that if one layer fails, we have control at the next layer and so on and so forth. So the security control types by functionality, we have the deterrent control, which is deployed to discourage violation of security policies. Next one is the preventive. So they are deployed to prevent or stop unwanted or unauthorized activity from occurring. So see the difference. This one is used to discourage, while this one, the preventive, is used to prevent or stop. Detective is used to discover or detect unwanted or unauthorized activity. So simply by seeing the name, you can make sense that which type of control is this. Compensating control provides options to other existing control to aid in enforcement of security policies. Corrective control are measures taken to fix security vulnerabilities or mitigate damage after a security incident has occurred. And directive controls are proactive measures designed to guide behavior and enforce compliance with security policies and procedures. So now coming out to example of these security control types. First one is the deterrent. So security guards, lighting, security cameras, separation of duties, security policies, and security awareness training. So you can see that these security control may fit into multiple types. For example, the security guard may also be detective as well as preventive. A security guard can detect an intruder entering the facility. He can also prevent the intruder from entering the facility using any means available to him. Similarly, the lighting is also a detective control as well as deterrent. Preventive control are fences, locks, biometrics, man traps, alarm systems, job rotation, data classification, penetration testing, access control methods, and firewalls. Detective are, as we can see, security guards is in deterrent as well as in detective. Guard dogs, motion detector, job rotation. So how does the job rotation detect a security control? For example, you have an employee A working, let's suppose, in a finance department. So let's suppose now you rotate the job of A and assign B to the same finance department doing the same function. So if A was doing something malicious, now the B can see what A has done, and in this manner we can detect the malicious activity. Mandatory vacation. Similarly, if you send A on leave and B fill the A job vacancy, we can again detect the uh, any malicious activity. Similarly, audit trail, as we study in the form of logs, intrusion detection system, violation report, honeypots, etc. Compensating controls are security policy, personnel supervision, monitoring, and work task procedures. Correctives are backup and restores. So backup and restores, as you can see, let's suppose you have a database and you take regular backup of this database, and if there is an eventuality, if the database is corrupted or unavailable, you can restore the data from backup and restore. So in this way, it is corrective. Patching, similarly, if there is a security vulnerability, you can patch and correct the vulnerability. Similarly, antivirus, anti-malware, forensic analysis, and disciplinary action. Directive control are again policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, physical signage, verbal instruction, contracts, and agreement. Now coming over to security program development frameworks, and the first one is the ISO 27000 series. So these are basically international standards on how to develop and maintain ISMS, that is information security management system inside an organization. So we have two framework in this series. The important one, we have many, but these two are important. First one is the 27001. So the focus of this one is on the requirement for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving the ISMS or information security management system. And the second one is ISO 27002. So this one provides guidelines and best practices for selecting and implementing information security controls listed in the Annexure A of ISO 27001. So as you can see, we will in the next slide, we will see the difference between these two. But here you can see this one, the two basically gives you the guideline and best practices on how to implement the 27001, and this is basically the standard or the requirement that should be used by the organization to establish and implement the ISMS inside their organization. So what is the difference between these two? So 27001 is basically the requirements that must be fulfilled to establish an ISMS inside organization. This defines the ISMS framework on what to do. And this can be certified. Yes, an organization can be 27001 certified if the organization fulfill these requirements. 27002 are basically the guidelines on how to implement the 27001. So these 27002 explains control on how to do it. This is what to do and this is how to do. So you cannot certify the 27002. This is just a guideline security framework for the 27001. So now coming over to our next topic, which is the types of law. And we have these different types of law, mainly the criminal, civil, regulatory, and intellectual property. And we will study all these one by one in detail. So the first one is the criminal law. So what is the criminal law? So criminal law basically deals with actions that break the law and harm society. So remember this thing, this keyword, that these are the laws that can be used to protect the society. So the prosecutor must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which can be hard in computer crime. So in criminal law, since these are the laws that result in even death, the proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt. That means the proof must be crystal clear. I mean, I think you understand the point that in criminal law, in order to prove someone guilty, the proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Why? Because the penalty in these laws are very high, such as fines, jail time, or even death in very serious cases. That's why to prove the guilt, the proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember this. So types of, you can say the penalties are the types of crimes. Maybe these may be felonies, which are serious crimes usually punished by more than 1 year in prison, or misdemeanors, which are less serious crimes and punished by fine or less than 1 year in jail. So the goal of the criminal laws are basically to punish offenders and deter them from committing similar crimes, or deter others from committing similar crime. So these laws are enacted to protect the harm to the society. So remember, these are the laws to protect the harm to the society. Next one is the civil, also known as the tort law. So these are the laws that handle disputes between private individual or organization. Remember, in the previous law, the criminal law, we were dealing with the individual and the society. Now we are dealing with between private individuals or organizations, and the decision is based on preponderance of evidence, whichever side seems more likely to be right. So this is in opposed to the previous, where the proof must be beyond reasonable doubt. Here it is preponderance of evidence, that is, whichever party or whichever organization or individual seems more likely to right. For example, if one individual seems to be 41% right and the next one is 51% right, it means that this one gets the decision in his or her favor. While in criminal, you must be, you can say that 99.9% sure regarding the proof. So the result is usually financial compensation. So in this type of laws, the punishment, you can say, it is in the form of financial compensation or jail time. And the damages can include compensatory, which cover actual losses, including legal fees, the lost profit, or the medical bills. May be punitive as well, which is extra penalty to punish the wrongdoer, and statutory, which statutory. So, sorry if I don't pronounce this word right. It is a bit complex. So, this is the fixed amount set by law, often used when the actual damage is hard to calculate. So, the civil law may have specific amount fixed that must be paid if a certain type of civil crime or civil law is broken. So related terms include liability, due care, due diligence, and the prudent person rule, that is acting responsibly like a reasonable person would. Next are the administrative or regulatory law. So the regulatory law, you can say, they are created by government agencies to control and monitor activities in specific industries. For example, in banking, we have Basel II regulations. In energy sector, we have Energy Policy Act, EPACT of 2005. And in healthcare, we have HIPAA, privacy and security rules. So remember, HIPAA is not a criminal or civil law. You can say it is an administrative regulatory law, and it deals with the healthcare. This one is important. You should remember HIPAA, that what it deals with. It is used to protect the confidential data of patients and their medical records. It is important. So the standard of proof is again more likely than not, unlike the criminal, and penalty are usually in the form of fines or imprisonment for violating regulations. Now coming over to our third laws type, which is intellectual property. So these laws basically protects creations of the mind, such as inventions, designs, artwork, music, and software. So as the name indicates, these laws basically protect intellectual properties such as invention, design, artwork, music, and software. So a company must actively protect its intellectual property, for example, by registering patents or trademark, otherwise it may lose its legal rights. So if a company has not registered its invention in the form of patents or trademark, it cannot then legally challenge the other party of copying their patents or trademark. So the World Intellectual Property Organization, or you can say WIPO, is a UN agency that oversees international intellectual property protection and cooperation. So common violation of this law may include licensing misuse. For example, using something without proper permission. If you don't have a license of, let's suppose, a software and you are using it, it is misuse, licensing misuse. Plagiarism, for example, copying someone else's work. For example, you can say someone thesis Piracy is illegal copying or distribution of software and movies, such as in the form of you people must understand and know the torrents, where these movies and other stuff such as games and music are distributed. So these are illegal. Corporate espionage is stealing trade secret or confidential information. For example, stealing the Pepsi secret recipe of their soft drink. So this is their trade secret, and if someone tries to steal or someone steal this trade secret, it is against the intellectual property law. So what are trade secrets? So a trade secret is information that gives a company a competitive advantage, like formulas, processes, or design. As I gave the example in the previous slide, a trade sample may be the formula of the Pepsi cold drink. It must be kept secret and protected from unauthorized access or disclosure, and it is owned by the company and often essential for its success. So, to qualify as a trade secret, the information must be real, valuable, and not easily discovered or guessed by others. Next is copyright. So, copyright protects the expression of ideas such as books, music, artwork, videos, or software, not the idea itself. So, anyone can write, let's suppose, a fiction book, but a specific fiction book, let's suppose, named as you can say a fiction book named as, this is a funny fiction book name, A Lion King. So if someone registered their book with the same name, you can say, or even copy some content of this book, this is a violation of this copyright itself. But you can write other fictional book on the same topic, but without copying the original author, ideas or name or other thing. So the creator has the right to control how their work is used, shared, copied, or sold. Protection starts automatically once the work is created. It does not have to be registered or published. So the copyright is automatically registered. The author does not have to register or publish it. As soon as it is created, it is automatically protected. So the duration of copyright is for an individual author, the lifetime of the author plus 70 years. So for example, if the author is 70 years old, then the uh, copyright is will be 70 years. You can say, let's suppose he created the copyright at the age of 50, then the copyright lifetime would be 90, because he created it at 50. So 70 plus 20 is equal to 90. For a corporation, it is 75 years from the publication. So limitation on copyrights are first sale. So once a copy of the work is sold, the buyer can resell the copy. For example, reselling a book. Fair use allows limited use of the copyrighted material for purposes like education, research, news, or commentary. So next intellectual property type is the trademark. So trademark protects a word, a symbol, logo, sound, color, or a design that identifies a product or brand. So this prevents other from copying a company's unique look or identity. So you can say, or you can see that each company has a unique symbol and logo. For example, if you see at Microsoft, it has a specific logo. Similarly, you can see at Nike, at Apple, all these companies have their specific symbol and logo, and you cannot copy them. For example, brand names, for example, name Nike as well as the Nike logo, this one, operating system symbols such as the Apple uh, symbol or the Microsoft Windows symbol. So the Trademark Law Treaty Implementation Act provides international protection to trademarks. So what are patents? So patents basically protects new and non-obvious invention for 20 years. So the copyright was the lifetime of the author plus 70 years, and for corporation it was 75. The patent is valid for 20 years. So it gives the owner exclusive rights to make, use, or sell the invention. For example, cryptographic algorithm. An individual may register a cryptographic algorithm invented by him as a patent, and it will be valid for 20 years. It is considered the strongest form of protection. Patents are published to inspire new invention. The Patent Corporation Treaty, that is PCT, offers international protection in over 130 countries. The owner must enforce their own rights through the legal system. So this is now the summary of the intellectual property. We have the trade secret, which is the what it protects. So it protects the confidential business information that gives a competitive advantage, and it must be valuable, secret, and protected from disclosure. And its duration is not limited. It is as long as it remains secret. For example, the Coca-Cola recipe copyright is the original work of authorship. For example, books, music, software, art, and it protects the expression, not the idea itself. It covers reproduction and distribution rights, and its duration is author's life plus 70 years and for individuals and 75 years for corporation. Examples include software code or a song or a book, etc. Trademark are the words, logos, sounds, colors, or symbols that identify a brand. So these basically distinguishes the product, prevents copying of look and feel of the product, protected. It is protected internationally, and its duration is as long as it's in use and renewed by the company. For example, Nike logo or Apple symbol. Patent is the something new, useful, and non-obvious invention or processes, and it gives exclusive rights to use and sell the invention to the inventor itself. It is strongest protection and published to inspire innovation. Its duration is 20 years, and examples include cryptographic algorithm or some new hardware design. So now coming over to our next topic, important topic, US privacy laws. So this one is important, and some I have seen some students and professionals overwhelmed by these laws due to the sheer number of text that are included in the books to describe these laws. So I will give the advice that you don't need to remember each para, that when these laws were first published, how many sections are there in this law, etc. You just need to remember the main focus of these law, and you will be good to go. For example, the first one, so we are first talking about US, then we will talk about the global laws. So the first US privacy law is, we are specifically talking about the privacy laws. Privacy is dealing with the confidentiality of individuals and citizen private data. Confidentiality of citizen private data. So HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and its focus in industry is of course the healthcare, and it protects medical and patient health information, and the term for this type of data is PHI. We have PII, personal identifiable information, and PHI for patient health information. Next is the GLBA. This one is also important, which is Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. So this law basically deals with the financial industry or financial sector, and this one safeguards customer financial and personal data. So again, we were talking about the individuals and personal data. So when it is their medical data, it is dealt with by the HIPAA. When it is their financial data, it is dealt with by the GLBA. So if you remember that GLBA deals with the protection of the financial data of the customers or the personnel inside US, you are good to go. COPA, next is the COPA, that is Children Online Privacy Protection Act. So it is deals with the industry of online services for children, for example, online services such as in YouTube, etc. And the main protection goal that this law provides is it limits data collection from children under 19. So remember, this law deals with the protection of uh, children, privacy, or you can say children under 13 children data. CCPA or CPRA, that is California Consumer Privacy Act or Right Act. So it is general consumer privacy, and it gives California residents control over their personal data, which is right to access, delete, and opt out of sale. FISMA is Federal Information Security Management Act. This one is also important, and its focus is federal agencies. It ensures security and privacy of government information systems. Next is the Cloud Act, that is clarifying lawful overseas use of data act. So this is not the cloud, Amazon cloud, or you can say AWS. This cloud stands for clarifying lawful overseas use of data act, and this one deals with the data stored abroad. And you can remember this inside the cloud. Cloud is also distributed form of data storage. So cloud also store data abroad. So you can remember this law through this mnemonic. So this law basically allows US law enforcement to access data held by US companies overseas. So Cloud Act basically deals with the protection of data stored outside the US. So now coming also some global privacy laws, and the first one and the most important one is the GDPR, that is General Data Protection Regulation, and this one deals with the region and of European Union or EU, and it is comprehensive law protecting personal data and privacy rights of individuals. So if you see at the text that is written under GDPR, it is very extensive. So you should not be overwhelmed or intimidated by that text. You should just remember that what this law deals with, what it protects, where is its jurisdiction. So I remember when I was giving the exam, there was a question regarding some company having to protect the personal data of citizen, and that company was in Germany. I remember this particular question. And the question was that which law would be applicable to this scenario? And there were multiple options. One was the GDPR. So if you remember that, if you know that Germany is in EU, and if you know that the privacy of the EU citizen is dealt with by the GDPR, then you know the correct answer. So always remember that this is not about cramming or memorizing the facts and data. It is about understanding the context, understanding the concept. So next is the 27701. It is again, its scope is all over the world, international, and it is a framework for managing and protecting personally identifiable information, or PII, and it is an extension of ISO 27001, which was to create the ISMS framework. 5PA, or you can say PIPDA, it is Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, and this jurisdiction or region is Canada. It regulates private sector use of personal information. Next is the Privacy Act of 1988. It is applicable in Australia, and it defines rules for handling personal data under the Australian privacy principle, that is APPs, known as APPPI. which is Act on the Protection of Personal Information. It is applicable in Japan and it governs how organizations collect and use personal data. Next is PDPA, that is Personal Data Protection Act, which is a Singaporean law, and it again controls collection, use, and disclosure of personal data. So next is the PCI DSS, that is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. So this one is not a legal mandate. So remember, this is important point, that this is not some regulatory or legal law. It is not a legal mandate. This is a standard. Okay. So it is a payment card industry. Payment card industry self-regulate its own security standards to this PCI DSS. It applies to any business worldwide that transmits, processes, or stored payment card transaction to conduct business with customers. Compliance is enforced by the payment card vendor, and compliance requirements are dictated by the number of transactions as well as any previous security issues. So now coming over to these important concepts, what are policies, standard, baselines, guidelines, and procedures. So these, what are these terms? What are their definition, their purpose, some example, and whether they are mandatory or not. First one is the policy. Remember, you will encounter many questions inside your CISSP exam regarding the policy, what it is, who is responsible for it, what it deals with. So policy is basically a high level. Remember, when we see a high level, we mean the executive level, such as CEO or CFO. It is high level statement of management's intent or direction. So policy is given from the highest level of management, such as CEO, CFO, and the purpose is that it defines what must be done. It sets overall goal and expectations. For example, if we give an example of policy, all company devices must be protected with strong passwords. So this is a high level statement. It does not define what does we mean by strong password, what will be the length of the password, etc. So these details are then given in the standard or baseline, etc. So is it mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory for the employees or the company to follow the policy. Next is the standard. So it is the mandatory rule supporting the policy. So see, this is the highest level document, and then this is supported by these other documents such as standard, baseline, procedure, and guideline. It defines specific requirements that must be followed. For example, a standard example can be given that password must be at least 12 character long, and it must include letters, numbers, and symbols. So we have set a standard that this is how strong the password must be. So as we can see, this was most generic. Now we are coming towards something specific, that the password must be, this is, we have set a standard. So we cannot go below the standard. The password cannot be 11 character long, and it must include letter, number, and symbol. So again, yes, it is mandatory to follow the standard as well. Next is the baseline. It is the minimum level of security that must be met. As the name indicates, this is the base level of security that must be implemented. So the purpose of baseline is to ensure consistent security across all systems. What does this mean? This means that if you have 100 systems, and let's suppose you have set a baseline that the systems must have antivirus installed, and our server must have antivirus and latest security patches installed. It means this is the minimum level of security. This is a baseline that must be implemented on all the systems. So again, yes, baseline is also mandatory to follow. Procedures are step-by-step instruction on how to carry out a task. So it defines how to do it in detail. For example, steps for resetting a forgotten password, And again, yes, procedures are also mandatory to follow. You should follow all the steps of a procedure so that the task is carried out in an appropriate manner. And last one is the guideline, which is a recommendation and a flexible practice. So remember the word flexible, it means it is not mandatory, it can be done or it can be left off. So the purpose is that it provides advice and not mandatory action. For example, it is recommended to change the password every 90 days. So it is a good recommendation and a good practice that the password should be changed at least every 90 days. But if the employees don't do, it is not mandatory, it is optional. So as we can see, this is policy is at the highest level. It is from the high level management. It is their intent, or you can say it is their vision. Then we have specific standard. These are specific mandatory rules. Baseline are the minimum security level that must be set at our system, and it gives consistency to system. Procedure are step-by-step instruction, and guidelines are recommended best practices. So besides these guidelines, all these are mandatory. Guideline is recommended but not mandatory. It is optional. So now coming over to a very important topic of this domain, that is risk management. So a definition of the risk management. So risk management is the process of managing risk associated with the use of information technology. It involves identifying, assessing, and treating risks to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of an organization's asset. So we have some risk definitions. We have different terms associated with the risk, and we will define these. So risk is the chance that a threat will actually happen, as we studied in our initial slides. So controls are basically protection used to reduce risk, or you can also say used to mitigate risk. And controls can be physical, as we studied, such as locks. They can be administrative, such as policies, or technical, such as firewalls. Controls are also sometimes called safeguards or countermeasures. So then we have another terminology of total risk, which is the risk before any protection or any control is applied. So when there is no control applied, then the asset is having a total risk, and the residual risk is when residual risk is the risk that remains even after protection. So remember, you cannot completely eliminate the risk. You can, as we studied in the definition, reduce the risk. You can reduce the risk or lessen the risk, but you cannot completely eliminate it. That's why we have a residual risk, which is the risk that remains after you apply the control or protection. So remember, the protection, control, safeguard, countermeasure, they are used interchangeably. Secondary risk is a new risk that appears after trying to fix another one. What does this mean? This means that, let's suppose you installed, let's suppose, a firewall to remove a risk. Risk was from hackers, from intrusion. So you installed a firewall. Now you have a secondary risk that this firewall is also a point of failure. For example, if your firewall, let's suppose, suddenly shuts down, you may have unavailability of services. So you have a secondary risk that was introduced when you tried to eliminate the first or primary risk. Incident is when a risk actually happens. So incident occurs when risk actually occurs or happens. So what are the risk management steps? So the first one is the risk identification. Second one is the risk assessment. We will study all these one by one in detail. Next is the risk mitigation, and last one is the risk evaluation. So the first one was the risk identification. So it is self-explanatory. It is used to identify the risk and identify and assign value to asset. So the first step inside the identification is that you must identify the asset and then assign the values to the assets. So some assets may be of high value, some may be of low value, so that you can apply control accordingly. You cannot apply all the control to all the assets. Next is to identify threats and vulnerabilities that could affect them. So you identify the assets, you identify their value, and then you identify the threats and vulnerabilities that could affect these assets one by one. So next step in the risk management is the risk assessment. After you identify, you assess the risk. So risk assessment determines the level of risk that is posed to each asset or the level of risk for each asset. And we have two methods to assess the risk. One is the qualitative. This is based on judgment or rating. For example, in this type of risk assessment, we use the term high, medium, or low. Next is the quantitative. It is based on numbers and financial values. As the name indicates, it gives you a concrete quantity, and it is also sometimes known as it is measured in dollars. So for example, if you have an asset, let's suppose, give me an example, a firewall. So you can say that this firewall is worth 2000 USD. So this firewall quantitative value is 2000 USD. So the qualitative example may be given, for example, a reputational damage. So you cannot quantify the reputational damage easily in the form of USD. You can say that reputational damage is low, medium, or high due to this particular risk. The third step is when you identify, assess the risk. The third step is to mitigate the risk or your response to the risk. So this step decides how to handle each identified and assessed risk. So these are important. These terminology your risk mitigation strategy or response may be either to reduce the risk, that is to apply control to lower the risk. So if you apply the control and reduce the risk, you will have the residual risk, but it will be less than the total risk, and it will be manageable for the organization. You can either accept the risk. This is acknowledging the risk and taking no further action. So this one is maybe seems strange to you. For example, if you have, let's suppose you have a threat of fire to your organization, and let's suppose if fire occurs and you calculate that it may damage property worth, let's suppose, 50,000 USD. This is you calculated that this is maybe the annual damage from fire threat. And if you do apply the protection, let's suppose if you buy the insurance from this, their cost is, let's suppose, 100K USD. So you can see that the protection is costly than the damage itself. In such scenario, we accept the risk. Next is the transfer risk. Transferring the risk, which is shifting the risk to another party. Whenever there is a transfer term, there is always the insurance or outsourcing. So you do the insurance, for example, as we study in the form of this fire insurance or other cybersecurity insurance. So this is you do the transfer the risk to another third party in the form of insurance or outsourcing. Avoid is eliminating the activity causing the risk. What does this mean? This means that, let's suppose, an organization was planning to let's suppose develop a new data center in an earthquake prone area. So if the organization all together decides to not develop that data center due to the risk of earthquake, they have altogether avoided the activity of developing the data center. I hope this makes sense. So first they were developing the data center in a particular area, but there was a risk of earthquake. So now they have eliminated, or they have decided not to develop there. So they have eliminated the activity altogether and they have avoided the risk. Last one is the reject, which is not the recommended one. It is to ignore or deny that the risk exists. So this one is particular one that is not recommended. You can do any of these four, but not this one. And the fourth step is the ongoing controls and evaluation. So once you do all identify the risk, assess the risk, and mitigate the risk, you should not stop there. You should continuously monitor and review controls to ensure they remain effective. So now coming over to the risk assessment methodologies, as we studied risk assessment or risk analysis. First one is the qualitative. So as we studied, it is based on subjective judgment to estimate the likelihood and impact of risk. And this method helps prioritize which risks need attention first. And we may use the Delphi technique, which is the expert opinion, to reach agreement. So this is just on the judgment. As we studied that we use term high, medium, or low. So for example, this can be on your judgment that the uh, damage or the threat of fire to our data center is medium or low or high, and these can be done on multiple scenarios such as environmental scenario, past history, the structure of the building, whether it is made of wood, concrete, etc. So this is qualitative. Quantitative is where you assign a monetary or dollar value to each risk event. It is more detailed and complex and require special skills. It is used for business decision and cost benefit comparison. So you can do comparison that how much the control cost and how much is actually the assets worth, and then you can do the business decisions. And it depends on qualitative data to identify and describe risk before measuring them. So it is not qualitative data, it is basically quantitative data. It is quantitative. Because we are now dealing with numbers such as dollars, etc., that how much an asset is worth in dollars and how much damage in term of dollar can a threat pose to that specific asset. So again, qualitative assessment, it assesses risk based on subjective input, and it uses terms like high, medium, low. And this one is inexpensive and quick way to begin the prioritization and ranking of risk. For example, this table shows that this here we have the impact, that what will be the impact of or consequence of a specific risk, and what is the probability of or likelihood of this risk being occurring. And then we have high, medium, low, low, medium, high, and these number are the number of risk that resides in the high, medium, or low categories. Quantitative requires more experience than qualitative analysis. It uses mathematical calculation to assign a dollar value to each risk, and it helps make business decisions based on measurable data in terms of dollars. The goal is to find the financial impact of a risk and decide the most cost-effective control for the asset. It is essential for performing a cost-benefit analysis when choosing security measures. So this table is important. It is the quantitative analysis formulas and terms. So these formulas are then used to determine the quantitative analysis of specific assets. So the first term is the asset value. It is the dollar value of an asset to the organization. For example, a customer database may be worth $100,000. Next is the EFR, exposure factor. So this is the percentage of asset value lost or damaged if a risk happens. For example, a fire could destroy 25% of the database's value. Next is the SLE, that is single loss expectancy. So this is the cost of one risk event. So if fire occurs once, the database will be destroyed 25%, and this is known as SLE. So SLE is the asset value multiplied by exposure factor. So the asset value in our example was 100,000. The damage or the exposure factor from a single event was 25%, which is 0.25. So our SLE value is 25,000. Next term is the ARO, or the annual rate of occurrence. So this is how often a risk is expected to occur in a year. So if the risk occurs 2 times in a year, ARO will be 2. If it occurs 10 times, ARO will be 10. And if it occurs once every 10, the ARO will be 1 by 10 or 0.1. So if a fire is expected once every 10 years, the ARO will be 0.1. And if the fire is expected to occur 10 times each year, the ARO will be 10. So I hope you remember, you understand the concept. If always remember, if there is any issue in understanding specific term or formula or terminology, you can always write me inside the comment and I will reply there. And it is a good method for other as well to learn as a community when you post the comment. And if you people like, you can also write in the comment that I should do live interaction. I can also do live interaction after a specific domain or for a specific domain, so that we can discuss these things interactively. So the next terminology is the ALE, that is annual loss expectancy. So it is the expected yearly loss from a specific risk. So the formula for ALE is, so these formulas are important, you should know them. Formula for ALE is SLE, we calculated SLE over here, multiplied by ARO. And so in our this particular example, SLE was 25,000, ARO was 0.1. So our ALE is 2500 per year. ALE is annual loss expectancy. Total cost of ownership, or TCO, it is the total cost of applying a safeguard, including the setup and maintenance. So for example, a backup system costing 5,000 setup plus 5 years maintenance. So what will be the TCO for a year? It will be 5,000 plus 500 or 5,500. So return on investment is the money saved or gained from using a safeguard. So if the control saves 2,500 a year, the return on investment shows if it's worth it. So since this is one-time cost, if you apply this one time, the annual maintenance is only 500. So you can decide that it is worth it, because the annual cost due to this risk is 2,500. So this investment is worth it. So you can see that when you apply this formula, you determine the TCO ROI in the form of dollar, and then you can decide whether you should apply this safeguard or not. Another important concept is the business continuity and disaster recovery planning. So what is BCP, or business continuity planning? A BCP basically ensures the organization can continue essential operations during and after a disruption like cyber attacks, power loss, or natural disaster. And the focus of BCP is that the business should be running with minimal downtime. Next is the DRP. So what is then disaster recovery plan? So a DRP focuses on restoring IT systems. So this is the key difference between the BCP and DRP. DRP is specific to the IT systems, data, and the IT infrastructure after a disaster. This terminology, this phrase is very important. You should know that DRP is a subset of BCP. So BCP is overall umbrella term. You can say it is the big terminology, and the DRP, you can say it is a subset of BCP, and it deals specifically with the technical recovery. So this slide is important. You should know these terminology, that DRP deals with the technical recovery, such as restoring IT system, database, infrastructure of the data center, etc. While the BCP deals with the overall continuity of the operation, including the HR, including the facility, including the other infrastructure for sitting of the employees, etc. So again, what is the difference between BCP and DRP? So the focus of BCP is continuous business operation, while the focus of DRP is to restore IT systems and data. And the scope of BCP is organization-wide. It includes people, processes, facilities, as well as IT. So the scope of, you can say, BCP is wide. It includes all the things inside organization, while DRP scope is narrow. Its scope is mainly IT and data recovery. So the goal of BCP is to maintain all essential functions, while the DRP goal is recovery of technology and data. Timing is BCP is applicable during and after disruption, while another important difference is DRP is after disruption. After disruption occurs, as the name indicates, it is disaster recovery. So we often use the term recovery with the data recovery or database recovery. So you recover something after it is lost. For example, your database is corrupted. Now you want to recover, you can recover it from the backup. So it is after the effect that the disruption or risk has occurred, while the BCP is during and after the disruption. Another important terminology and concept is the BIA, or Business Impact Assessment. So BIA identifies and ranks business processes and resources by their importance to the organization. It helps find and evaluate risk, whether from internal sources or third parties. So BIA considers both the probability and impact of disruptions to the business processes and resources. It uses quantitative metrics like cost or downtime to set clear priorities, and it helps decide which system or functions to recover first during an incident. So, as we can see, the name indicates business impact assessment. What are some of the processes or resources that, if impacted by a disruption, will impact overall business? So you identify these processes, these resources, you prioritize them, and then you decide that which functions or which resources you should recover first during an incident. So what is the relationship between BIA, BCP, and DRP? So BIA, it basically finds and ranks critical business functions, estimates impact of downtime, and sets recovery priorities. And the BIA is basically the starting point. It tells you what to protect and how fast it must be recovered. BCP, Business Continuity Plan, ensures business operations continue during and after a disruption. It uses the BIA results. So remember, BIA is the starting point. BCP uses the BIA result to design strategies for keeping the essential services running. So this is the first, this is the second, and then DRP basically focuses on restoring the IT system data infrastructure after a disaster. It is a subset of the BCP, and it supports BCP by handling the technical recovery steps identified as priorities in the BIA. So you can say that basically BIA is basically input to both the BCP and DRP. So BIA continued. So we have some terminology associated with the BIA. These are MTD, that is maximum tolerable downtime, MTO, maximum tolerable outage. So these are basically the longest time a function can be down before it causes unacceptable damage to the organization. It defines the upper limit of acceptable downtime. And what happens if the upper limit is crossed? We start the BCP and DRP processes. RTO, or recovery time objective, it is the target time to restore a function after disruption. It must be less than the MTD, or maximum tolerable downtime. This is important sentence. So the RTO, recovery time objective, should be less than MTD, because MTD is the maximum downtime that an organization can afford. So you must recover the function through RTO, and it should be less than MTD. And it guides how quickly recovery plans should work. RPO is the recovery point objective, and it is the maximum amount of data loss the organization can tolerate in time. For example, 2 hours data loss, 3 hours data loss, it determines how often backup should occur. So for example, if your RPO is, let's suppose, RPO is equal to 4 hours. So it is the maximum amount of data loss the organization can tolerate. So your backup should occur, backup frequency should be less than 4 hours. For example, you can say that your backup occurs after each 3 hours. This is one backup. Again, after 3 hours, you take another backup. So if you take backup here and disruption occurs over here, it means your data loss is less than 4 hours, or your RPO is intact. So this is, as I explained, this is also explained in this diagram. So this is the loss of data, and this is your downtime. This is where disaster occurs. I hope it is understandable. This is which I described in our. So RPO is also in the form of time. RTO is also in the form of time. So how do we plan the BCP, its approval and implementation? So the plan approval should be done by the CEO if possible. He should endorse the plan. He or she should endorse the plan. Otherwise, another senior officer can do it, and it indicates dedication of the business to the process of business continuity planning. Then you need to plan the implementation. So you need to create implementation guide and schedule, deploy resources to implement the BCP plan, and supervise the maintenance of the plan. You also need to train and educate the employees on the BCP. You need to distribute the BCP plan on need to know basis. So it is should be distributed only to those that need to know the plan. Everyone should get at least an overview of the plan. So this slide introduces personnel security controls, which is a fundamental administrative and procedural method used in security governance. This slide basically focuses on preventing fraud, misuse, or error by ensuring that no single individual has excessive rights. So the first Personal security control is separation of duties. Separation of duty means that no single person should have all the authority or control over a critical process. This reduces fraud or mistakes. For example, one employee approves payment in a system while the other issues the checks or issues them. If both these processes were done by a single employee, he could issue the payments to himself or herself, thus committing fraud. Split knowledge is a sensitive process. Split knowledge is the method in which sensitive process is divided so that no one person knows all parts of it. So the sensitive process may be a password, maybe some other information. For example, two employees each know half an encryption key so that neither can use it alone. So both the employees will be needed to use the encryption key. Rotation of duties. So employees periodically switch roles or responsibilities to detect fraud and improve skill coverage. As we already studied, an accountant swaps roles every few months so irregularities can be spotted. Two-person control is two authorized individuals must act together to complete a sensitive task. So launching a missile or accessing a secure vault requires two people turning keys simultaneously. What is M of N control? So out of N authorized people, a minimum of M must cooperate to perform a critical function. Similarly, such as we studies in separation of duties. For example, if we have total 5 number of executive, then 3 of 5 or 3 executive must agree to approve or must approve to access the company's encryption keys. Next, our next topic is the hiring practices. So these are some of the procedures that involve or stages that involve in hiring and firing the employees. So first one is the onboarding. So onboarding is the process of bringing a new employee into the organization, including setting up accounts and access. So the purpose of onboarding is that it gives only the minimum access needed for their role or for the new employee, which is also known as the principle of least privilege. So for example, if the new employee is in the finance department, he or she should be given the role inside the finance group, not in HR or other department, and should be given only the minimum necessary rights to perform their duty. Next is the background check. So verifying an applicant's history, identity, and possible criminal or financial issues before hiring. So this helps ensure the person can be trusted with sensitive information or system. So you can say this one is a detective as well as a preventive control. It detects and you can say a threat before occurring, and it also prevent a threat so that it can be eliminated before it takes place. Termination is the process followed when an employee leaves voluntary or involuntary. So it is necessary to revoke all access of the terminating employee immediately, collect the company assets such as ID, laptops, any other devices, and conduct the exit review. Security awareness training is the ongoing education for all employees on security policies, threats, and best practices. So, this helps employees recognize phishing, handle data properly, and follow security protocols. So, our last topic is the code of ethics. So, these are known as canons, and we have one, two, three, and 4. So we have 4 canons. These are mandatory to be followed by the security professional. These are the ISC2 canons. So these are important to remember. And the first one is to protect society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure. So cybersecurity professional must prioritize the safety and security of the public and critical systems above personal and organizational interest. So remember that we are protecting society, common good, public trust, confidence, and infrastructure. So remember the order of these the words and the, you can say, the topics inside each canon is also important. So if you are to choose between the infrastructure and the society or the public trust, you should protect the society first. Similarly, act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. So always follows the law, be truthful, and act with integrity in all professional activities. In the same manner, if you are given the choices, you should follow this order. You should first act honorably, then honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. So there are two things. One is to choose between legality and to act honestly and honorably. You should act honorably and honorably, then legally. Third one is provide diligent and competent service to principal. So perform duties carefully and skillfully for your employers or clients, ensuring quality and responsibility. And the last one is to advance and protect the profession. So contribute to the reputation and growth of the cybersecurity field by sharing knowledge, mentoring, and upholding ethical standards. So thank you so far for watching this video. That's all for domain 1. So please like this video, share it in your groups with your peers. And if you have any questions or any insight or suggestion, please write them in the comment so that we can discuss the topics further if there are any doubts for the benefit of us all. So I will see you in the video 2 on the domain 2. So see you soon. Take care and bye.